persona, tutto un altro mondo.
Sony VHS. Chi ce l'ha, lo sa.
Ed ecco di nuovo collegati con il Gran Premio del Messico, ultimi momenti, 5 minuti alla luce verde alla partenza con tutte le telecamere puntate naturalmente sull'uomo della pole position, il favorito insieme a Patrese, perché vi ricordo che ci sono 16 millesimi di secondo che dividono Patrese da Mansell sulla prima fila, 16 millesimi legati anche ad un sorpasso un po' incerto di Patrese ieri con un doppiato più lento che gli ha lasciato strada, ma logicamente Riccardo ha avuto un attimo di esitazione nella parte mista del tracciato e probabilmente ben più l'esitazione è costata di 16 millesimi. Vi ricordo i due temi della gara, li ripeto: sconnessione della pista che porta a saltellamenti incredibili delle vetture, tantissimi incidenti spettacolari tra venerdì e sabato, ma anche in gara con il pieno ci saranno dei problemi per restare in traiettoria. Ma su queste immagini di Modena già seduto nel muletto della sua Jordan in attesa quindi di partire eventualmente dai box, vediamo un attimo proprio una verifica tra i comportamenti dell'abitacolo di una Williams Renault a destra, vedete, di Patrese e la McLaren di Senna. Non è tanto l'aspetto prestazione, ma guardate il comfort e i movimenti del volante molto più ampi e molto più spettacolari di Senna con la sua McLaren a sospensioni tradizionali, mentre molto più puliti i movimenti della macchina della Williams Renault a sospensioni attive di Patrese. Ma guardate anche, notate, al di là degli scuotimenti del casco che possono essere anche dovuti a effetti aerodinamici, come il panorama, gli alberi sono fissi, fermi rispetto alla telecamera proprio perché l'abitacolo non si muove, tutte le sconnessioni sono assorbite dalle sospensioni attive per la macchina di Riccardo Patrese. Guardate, perfetta l'immagine del panorama, dello scenario, guardate quanto più confuso e quanti movimenti spettacolari fa appunto Ayrton Senna con il suo volante, anche se proprio la velocità superiore della Williams portano un confronto non diretto curva dopo curva. Guardate anche quanto traballa la telecamera della McLaren, questo è molto significativo, tutte le sconnessioni si ripercuotono sull'abitacolo, sulla carrozzeria, sul telaio, compromettendo anche la stabilità della telecamera. A destra invece abbiamo un Riccardo Patrese che ha una telecamera perfetta e anche l'abitacolo stesso, gli specchietti della Williams Renault. Guardate, a sinistra addirittura le vibrazioni fanno staccare ogni tanto il segnale della telecamera della McLaren di Ayrton Senna.
São quase 14 horas, hora local, Cidade do México, para a transmissão direta do 15º Grande Prémio do México, do Autódromo Hermanos Rodrigues, a 2.200 metros de altitude. Faltam precisamente 3 minutos para que comece esta prova, que vai ter 69 voltas de corrida, uma extensão de 305 km. Nigel Mansell e Riccardo Patrese, os dois Williams Renault, na primeira fila da grelha de partida, e aí tem uma imagem geral da grelha de partida e de uma casa cheia neste autódromo Hermanos Rodrigues, com uma temperatura acima dos 30 graus e com um grau de poluição de mais de 260 pontos numa escala de 500 que tem vindo a ser registados nos últimos dias. Autódromo do 4.421 metros, 4 km 421 de extensão. Um autódromo extremamente bem situado e com muito conforto para os espectadores, mas uma pista extremamente difícil e muito perigosa, no dizer de todos os pilotos, e o Ayrton Senna que o confirme, conforme já devem saber, por aquilo que ele passou nos treinos aqui antes deste grande prémio. Vamos recordar somente que na primeira fila está Nigel Mansell e Riccardo Patrese em Williams Renault, na segunda Michael Schumacher e Michael Brundle no Benetton Ford, na terceira fila o Gerhard Berger e o Ayrton Senna em McLaren Honda, e na quarta fila JJ Leto e Gugelmin, Leto em Dallara Ferrari e Gugelmin em Jordan Yamaha. Uma nota negativa para a Ferrari, que não deixou de ter problemas durante todo o fim de semana e que ainda hoje de manhã os técnicos diziam que o maior receio que eles tinham era da resistência dos motores, atendendo à temperatura e atendendo sobretudo a problemas de circuito de lubrificação interna do motor. um circuito muito empenhativo, com médias altíssimas, mais de 200. No ano passado, recorda-se, Ricardo Patrese ganhou este grande prémio em 1h29, fez uma média de mais de 200 km a hora e, portanto, este ano as coisas vão ser semelhantes, se não superiores, atendendo a que o desempenho dos carros da Fórmula 1 deste ano é superior aos do ano passado, e tanto assim que Nigel Mansell bateu o recorde da volta mais rápida já nos treinos oficiais, 1:16.346, o melhor tempo, realizado na primeira sessão cronometrada de sexta-feira. Ricardo
seems to be lacking a bit of direction.
Well, Ferrari are in all sorts of problems, and it's going to take virtually the entire season, I think, for those problems to be finally resolved. But there we now see the 1-minute board, and most of the drivers' teams will be firing up the engines, and then at 30 seconds, another sign will go up and the green flag will be waved, and the cars will then make their final lap before they come onto the grid proper for the start of this, the 16th Mexican Grand Prix. And really, who's going to get into the first corner first, but really who's going to get out of it first, is the one question that everybody here, well, we just don't know, we're going to guess, but Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese, both made stunning starts, particularly Patrese in Kyalami just 3 weeks ago. Patrese obviously going to try and repeat the same medicine.
Well, and we were talking, John, just before, well, about 10 minutes ago, to Willy Weber, who's Michael Schumacher's manager, and we said, well, what is Michael going to do? Is he going to hang back or is he going to go for it? And Willy said, no, the first corner is where Michael is going to go for it. So there could be some excitement, but I think Ricciardo's going to go for it into that first corner.
Well, I think that the first 3 rows are all capable of getting down there more or less together, and it's going to be the last late breakers. But of course, the tires in these cars, while they're probably quite warm, they're not up to full racing temperature. And one of the problems, one of the uncertainties of this new one-tyre situation is because it is such a conservative tyre compound, we're not going to see pit stops for tyres first of all, but because it's a very conservative compound, the drivers' teams are conscious of getting too much surface heat into the tyre too quickly. That can happen in these early laps in a race. Drivers push very, very hard, very early in the race. You get surface temperature and the tyre gets a surface deterioration, and then of course the tyre performance is not up to the level that it ought to be normally. But coming down into the first corner, who's going to brake first and who's going to get out of that corner first really is going to be very, very exciting indeed.
Well, Jill and I are having a little bet. He thinks Nigel Mansell's going to win, and I do tip Tracy for a win here in Mexico, but I also think, and I think we all agree on it down here, a lot of it's going to depend who's going to get out of that first corner first. And look in the background here, the hills we see around Mexico City, we haven't seen them on Thursday, we haven't seen them on Friday, but here they are. And Mexico City on a day like this is definitely a very good place to be. Here through the S's, the point where Ayrton Senna lost control of his car, and Saturday afternoon, of course, Gerhard Berger lost control of his McLaren Honda. The McLaren team not having a happy time, they're having a very torrid time actually here in Mexico.
Yes, one of the wags, one of the media wags in the pits Saturday afternoon made the comment that it really was reminiscent of McLaren in 1981, when Andrea De Cesaris in his first year of Formula One racing had something like 18 shunts in the season, but certainly maybe he had 2 or 3 in any given weekend, so McLaren not really very happy to remember those less fortunate days for their team. But it was a great surprise to see both Berger and Senna falling off, and really their car not giving them the easiest of rides here this weekend. So really they need the new car as quickly as possible.
Now, when Ayrton said before the weekend, you can see a lot of crashes during this race or during the qualifying sessions. I don't think he emphasized the fact that most of them were going to be made by his own team.
No, this is true. I mean, he Senna having an accident and also getting hurt at a very, very rare occasion, thank goodness. But Berger had 3 very pretty spins off into the gravel traps, and finally, in fact, he tagged the wall pretty heavily, the same spot that Ayrton Senna did it on Friday afternoon.
We're ready to go racing. 69 race laps, which is a total distance of 190 mile an hour, or 190 miles to go. Every lap 2.7 miles long. To wait in for the man at the back of the grid who waved the green flag, and then Roland de Bruinsrade, the starter of all Formula One races, will switch the light to red, switch the light to green. There's the man with the green flag, and now it's waiting for the red, and then between 2 and 7 seconds it'll go to green. And who's going to have the best start? Oh, it's Riccardo Patrese on the left, who looks to be away a little bit earlier than Mansell getting it right. A big shot. It was Carl Wendlinger who went off. Carl Wendlinger who got the car all tangled up, and that's even Capelli who's involved, and I think we're going to have a restart unless the Mexicans get the track clear. John, I would love to see a replay of that because I don't know what happened.
Well, sure, there's another little further Johnny Herbert. It's unfortunate it happens. There's such tension at the beginning of these races, and everybody very, very pumped up indeed. But there doesn't appear, from what we can see, there's no red flag being hung out. Hold on a second.
No, it's being taken out, the red flag. It's the yellow flags at the moment they're looking for. Roland de Bruinswater, they're on his little starting podium while even Capelli walking back.
Yes, Capelli will out of the race, obviously, and a very sad departure for him. But that's just what happens, particularly in the middle to the back part of the grid when there's so much energy.
Well, I can't see a red flag yet. We still see even Capelli. I think it's Nigel Mansell who's leading, and all the enthusiasm and things that were happening. We missed who was leading the race, but I think it's Nigel Mansell in the lead in the Williams Renault.
I'm just picking up the sort of the third, fourth, and fifth place men. He's coming through the S's. Here we go. Now here you see the start. You see Jean Alesi came well in the middle.
It's back. It's Carl Wendlinger who attacks even Capelli.
Well, Wendlinger tipped. Somebody hit Wendlinger. That then pushed him into Capelli, and you see Capelli's car went from right to left, hit the wall, left rear, left front, and well, that's Capelli out of the race. But Wendlinger likewise. But who was it that hit Wendlinger? We haven't been able to see that clearly enough yet.
Well, there's the leader of the race, Nigel Mansell. And there's Mauricio Guzman into the pits. That's bad news for the Jordan team. Mauricio Guzman, the first man to come into the pits, and it's Mansell who's leading from Riccardo Patrese. Then it's Ayrton Senna, surprise, surprise, Martin Brundle, Michael Schumacher, Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi. What a start from Ayrton Senna, and with a good first lap from Nigel Mansell.
Well, we didn't see any action at the first corner. We saw a lot on the grid. We saw just at the very end of the grid going into the first corner, Johnny Herbert getting tangled up, but thank goodness that the front six cars did get through cleanly, and the front six of the first three rows of the first six cars.
Well, it looks like Wendlinger just moved over to the right. He got pushed a bit by someone who was close to him on the starting grid. Maybe Christian Fittipaldi, maybe Mika Häkkinen, but it's, for the moment, I think it's a bit impossible to see who it is. And there's another car involved as well. Well, a bit of a
Ligiers, one of the two Ligiers. All sorts of mayhem going on. But now Nigel Mansell securely in the lead from Riccardo Patrese second. Ayrton Senna third. But coming under pressure from Michael Schumacher.
Well, Schumacher's moved up then past Martin Brundle.
Yes, well that would be, I think, to be expected, because Schumacher very much intent on getting to the front as quickly as possible, whereas Martin Brundle very much more concerned with finishing this race. His intentions really are to get in the points, get a good race, let Michael Schumacher go after the front three cars.
Well, a very good qualifying performance from Mauricio Guzman has come to an end. Mauricio's out of the car. The car will be wheeled at the moment back into the garage. A very sad ending to a promising weekend for the Jordan team. But still, Stefano Modena into the race.
You have Mansell now around the S's at the back of the circuit. Really easy for him at this stage of the race. He's got Riccardo Patrese in second place. He's no pressure from anybody else. And he's just doing exactly what he did in South Africa. He's got the clear road. He's taking full advantage of it, trying to establish as quickly as possible a nice, comfortable buffer, and then really just to let everybody else run at his pace. Ayrton Senna keeping close in touch with Patrese, very much as he did in South Africa. Of course, Patrese has a car which I would consider under these conditions to be a much easier car to drive. And remember, Ayrton Senna is still aching quite a lot from those injuries he got on Friday afternoon.
Nigel Mansell with another fastest lap of the race at 22.6, but it's still early days in this race. He's got a 2.8-second lead over teammate Riccardo Patrese. Ayrton Senna 1 second behind Riccardo. Then it's Michael Schumacher, Martin Brundle, and there one of the Minardi, Christian Fittipaldi, has gone off in the Peraltada. I don't think he's hit anything, but the car well and truly buried into the gravel, and then that shovel comes out to shovel him out of the gravel and out of the race.
Well, that car, they will crane it away. They'll have to get it out of there very quickly, because within a minute or so the leading cars are going to be coming round. Fittipaldi, disappointing race for him, but there we are back with the leader Nigel Mansell. looking very, very comfortable indeed. You can see that he's not actually driving visually very quickly at all, but he's doing all that he needs to do to gradually pull away from Ricciardo. And again, this thing about the tyres, you mentioned it earlier, it's important at this point in the race not to overheat the tyre, because if you do that, then the performance of the tyre will drop away. Another 2 laps or so, and then the tyre will be really up to its working temperature, and then he can then begin to stand on it.
Early days in the race where first 7 are exactly the same as the 7 people that were in South Africa. Then it's Mika Häkkinen following John Alesi, so he's demoted Pierluigi Martini from that place. It's Mansell with another fastest lap, but it's Patrese who's gone even faster at this moment. Ayrton Senna, who's been observed by Michael Schumacher, who's now only 0.4 of a second behind the reigning world champion. Then it's Martin Brundle, Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi, AJ Leto, Gabriele Tacchini just outside the top 10 in 11th place. Bertrand Gachot is 12th at the moment. 13th, Andrea de Cesaris, Gianni Morbidelli. Then it's Michele Alboreto rounding out the top 15. But Mansell, 22.4 and 21.7 for Riccardo Patrese. And actually, that is roughly the same thing we saw in South Africa. The first couple of laps, John, Mansell opening up that gap, and then Patrese sort of upping the pace and trying to close the gap. But will he carry on or will he stop?
Yes, he is upping his pace, but in doing so, he's dragging along Ayrton Senna and Michael Schumacher. So as Patrese is picking up time, so are those 2 cars behind. Nigel Mansell was just over a 2-second lead. Really doesn't have to do any more than he wants to do where he is. He's got Patrese there as a buffer to Ayrton Senna. Mansell and Patrese have undoubtedly got the quicker race car. And here we're really seeing what is the outstanding ability of Ayrton Senna. But look at Michael Schumacher now getting closer to the rear wing of Ayrton Senna's McLaren. Schumacher would really love to get enough of a toe down this straight to be able to pull out and dive down the inside. And Schumacher, in fact, has just set the fastest race lap. So just keep an eye on the right-hand side. Is Schumacher going down?
Well, that fastest race lap's been corrected on the computer, but it's only a couple of hundredths of a second slower than another lap record for Nigel Mansell. John, inside with Berger.
Yes, we're in with Berger. We're looking just ahead at Martin Brundle's Benetton Ford. We can't really clearly, so you can just about see how close Schumacher is to the rear of Senna's McLaren Honda. So these 4 cars really not able to maintain the pace that the 2 Williams can do. And for Gerhard Berger and Ayrton Senna, they're going to have a very, very physical job this afternoon.
Well, I think the drive of the early laps, John, is coming from Mika Häkkinen, who is in 8th place at the moment, and Mika, believe it or not, started 18th on the grid.
Yes, but that was purely the result of that mess up on the grid. Lots of people had to back off, take avoiding action. Mika Häkkinen obviously got a clear path through, and then of course at the end of into the first corner, at the end of the straight, there's a further schmozzle, and he probably got some advantage out of that as well. Good opportunistic driving from Mika Häkkinen, and he and Johnny Herbert both capable of repeating their South Africa performance.
Well, we're settling into pattern at the moment. Nigel Mansell with a lead of 2.1 seconds over Riccardo Patrese, his teammate, who's just put in another fastest lap of the race. Then it's Ayrton Senna, I think a comfortable 3rd place. Michael Schumacher and Martin Brundle in 4th and 5th. And then it's Gerhard Berger in 6th place. Talking about Mika Häkkinen, he's still in 8th. Oh, see him right the curves.
It's Riccardo Patrese currently in 2nd place. Nigel Mansell, you can just see his car go into the left-hand part of the S, then into the right. Probably 100 metres or so behind Mansell, at accounting for the 2 seconds of a difference. And if we get a chance to contrast the difference in comfort, let's say, between the Williams of Patrese and Mansell and the 2 McLarens of Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger, it's so evident that the Williams rides the bumps. Remember, the Williams have got their active ride suspension. And if you can get all the parameters right, these are the things Nigel Mansell was talking about in that interview before we came live to the race, then you do have a distinct advantage, not just in performance, but really, and most importantly here today, in comfort.
Nigel Mansell, another fastest lap for him, but it's not another new lap record. 2.3 seconds, he gained 2.2 of a second. A status quo at the top of the field at the moment. Ayrton Senna in 3rd place. He's hounded by Michael Schumacher. Nothing really changing, but Well, would it be nice for Nigel Mansell and the whole Williams team, of course, to get another 1-2 here, put another 16 points in the bag, because the McLaren team is struggling, and Williams would so dearly love to take advantage of the McLaren struggling.
Well, of course, Williams got to capitalise as much as they can with the situation with McLaren not having their 1992 car available. The Williams is undoubtedly the quicker car, so in South Africa they had a 1-2. Here they've got to be a favourite for 1-2, barring any unreliability. And likewise in Brazil, in Ayrton Senna's home track, unless the new McLaren is absolutely magic out of the box, I can't see McLaren being able to seriously challenge either Riccardo Patrese or Nigel Mansell. And that's the situation Williams have got to take full advantage of, because of this 16-race, all races counting championship, any points lost can really lose you the championship, even at this very early part of the season.
Nigel Mansell opening up a gap now with Riccardo Patrese, 2.8 seconds. The gap is at the moment. Michael Schumacher still trying to get closer to Ayrton Senna. He's closer than he's ever been before, 0.3 of a second.
Yeah, Senna is able to pull out a little bit of a lead down that very long straight. His V12 Honda's just got that much more grunt than Michael Schumacher's V8 Ford. But Schumacher's all over him like a rash around the back of the circuit. But really, you have to give Senna full credit for doing an outstanding job. He's keeping his third place. He's defending it very, very well. And remember, this is the guy that had to be taken away to the medical centre on Friday afternoon with a very heavily bruised leg. And we keep repeating it, that McLaren Honda here in Mexico is not a very competitive package. But Senna, that's sort of, I suppose, in my mind, the greatest Formula One driver currently racing, is doing the job he has to do. He's running in fourth spot. Realistically, that's a third spot. Realistically, that's the best position he can have outside of unreliability for the two Williams. Well, look at him, he's sliding. In fact, you can see, just watching coming to that final part of the S's, Senna's car beginning to slide a little bit more than it was in the early laps. That's what Michael Schumacher wants. He wants to get close enough through this corner to be able to pass going down the straight.
Well, Nigel Mansell still leads. We've got 9 laps on the clock. We'll be back after the break with more racing.
Estamos com o Nigel Mansell no comando das operações, Patrese em segundo, os dois Williams, como disse já o Zé Miguel, no comando das operações, o Senna e aqui o menino surpresa. Eu diria que este Michael Schumacher é efetivamente uma revelação, um talento natural notável, que aliás se revelou bastante rapidamente quando surgiu na Fórmula 1, já na segunda metade da época passada. E a partir de então ele tem feito, de facto, tem excedido todas as expectativas, mesmo as mais otimistas, relativamente às suas possibilidades na Fórmula 1. Convém também lembrar já agora uma evolução técnica a nível da Fórmula 1, não neste carro que estamos a ver aqui, no Williams Renault, que essa já foi bastante comentada em várias ocasiões, a suspensão ativa, caixa semiautomática, enfim, e outros atributos, como a altíssima eletrónica e a transmissão controlada eletronicamente, facilitando a condução do piloto em termos de aderência. Afinal de contas, não é ele propriamente que comanda à sua vontade a força do motor transmitida às rodas, mas mais talvez o próprio circuito eletrónico, o cérebro eletrónico do que o carro dispõe, que diz quanta força é que as rodas precisam. E na altura em que vamos a bordo do carro do Patrese, ia referir somente aquele aspecto que é novo nos McLaren Honda, que é o de não haver nenhum elemento mecânico entre o piloto e o motor. Sim, mas não é ainda nestes casos.
Welcome back here in Mexico City. We're looking at Riccardo Patrese. We're riding with Riccardo Patrese, currently in second place behind his teammate Nigel Mansell, but in front of Ayrton Senna. Michael Schumacher is in fourth, Martin Brundle fifth, Gerhard Berger is in sixth place, Jean Alesi seventh, Mika Hakkinen eighth, JJ Leto is ninth, and Andrea de Cesaris is in 10th place at the moment.
We had a little message the other day from the Williams team, and in fact they're all sitting down in the Williams Conference Centre in Didcot watching this Grand Prix on Eurosport Live, so hello to the guys at Williams, and I would imagine you're all fairly happy with the results so far.
Yes, and Zuma did not have a revenge on anyone this weekend here in Mexico. 11 laps completed. The situation at the top is still the same, with Senna, I think, doing a sterling job keeping that third place. I think, John, it's the best he can hope for at the moment.
Absolutely, and Ayrton Senna now really, although he's still in a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of pain, putting that to the back of his mind and just going out. He is fighting for his 4th World Championship. He knows that he has to finish no lower than third. He's going to hope to win, but he thinks, I'm sure he's aware that both Williams are running so much within themselves. I'm sure if Mansell or Patrese really had to, they could up the pace of the race at this stage, but there's no purpose. Currently Senna 4 seconds behind Riccardo Patrese and some 8 seconds for Ayrton Senna. Having said that, look, that is the worst result that Ayrton Senna could have had. What a disastrous weekend the McLaren team have had, and really, well, I think Ayrton Senna will just want to get out of his car, go quickly to change, get into his airplane and fly back down to Sao Paulo, because this is not the weekend that he'd hoped for. In fact, he may not be allowed to go back to Sao Paulo. He may well have to go back to England, because that new McLaren, the MP47, very shortly the decision to commit to bring the car to Brazil will be made. I think it will be made on the basis of final tests next or this week, in fact, in England. So McLaren could well end up having a 6-car team.
So we have Mansell and Patrese. Then it's Michael Schumacher, who now once he's relieved of Ayrton Senna, goes a second quicker than he's gone all race.
Yes, and in fact Schumacher now is really going to try and catch up to Riccardo Patrese. Senna was holding Schumacher back, but that's just the advantage that the McLaren had, with the Honda engine being that much quicker down the straight. But now we just saw Michael Schumacher coming into view. We can see Martin Brundle a little bit further behind Schumacher. So the main focus of this race is going to be on whether Schumacher can catch up to Patrese, and in doing so, will he drag Martin Brundle along with him. Great performance from the two Benetton boys, and really a very, very impressive performance from this team, with the further Series 6 Ford HB engine. Of course, the Benetton, like everybody else, on Goodyear tyres. When that car was racing for its first season last year, it was on Pirelli tyres, so really we never got a very clear picture of the car's true potential. Oops, it's a very substantial engine failure for one of the Tyrrells.
Yeah, that's one of the Tyrrells gone. I think it's Olivier Grouillard, but I don't know for sure. But Grouillard, of course, in the second Tyrrell, the other driven by Andrea de Cesaris, who was in 8th place at the moment. And it is Grouillard, the dark helmet, getting out of the car. And another Ilmor engine gone. And the Ilmor engine, I must stress, John, I think it's a beautiful little engine. It's got lots of power, but they had some reliability problems this weekend.
Yes, they suffered a lot. In fact, both Tyrrell and the March team have had engine failures. And Mario Willen, who is here, in fact, delighted with the result from Surfers Paradise in the first round of the IndyCar Kart Championship, where the Penske cars with his latest version of the V8 Chevy won, but less pleased with the performance of his V10 Ilmor engine. And we think that's a very temporary problem. Mario is aware of what the problem is. He wasn't able to do very much to improve it, but I'm sure come Brazil in 2 weeks' time, he will have that situation very much under control. Dan Gerhard Berger, the only McLaren now left in the race, and his real task is just again to get that car to the finish. He doesn't seem to be able to run quick enough to threaten Martin Brundle, who's now in fourth spot.
Well, Nigel Mansell still leading. He's got a 3.7 second lead over Riccardo Patrese at the moment. Then it's Michael Schumacher, 5.7 seconds behind, and that was the lap before we see lap. It's 2.5 seconds, and Riccardo Patrese doing a 1:99, and suddenly the gap is down to 2.5 seconds. Then it's Michael Schumacher, who lost 2 seconds then to Riccardo Patrese. Martin Brundle and Gerhard Berger rounding out the top 5, and they're way, way ahead of anybody else. In 6th place at the moment, it's Jean Alesi. Then it's Mika Hakkinen in 7th, Andrea de Cesaris in 8th place, JJ Leto in 9th, and Gianni Morbidelli with the Minardi Lamborghini is in 10th place. Then Gabriele Tarquini, and then well, we don't see very much of him, but maybe we should, because I think he's doing a sterling job with the front metal with the Ford HP engine. Then it's Johnny Herbert trying to work his way back up. Eric Comas coming from the last row of the grid, being in front of his teammate Jerry Boutsen. Then it's Bertrand Gachot falling back a little bit. Michele Alboreto is 16th. Andrea Chiesa in his first Grand Prix of his career is 17th, and the only remaining Jordan in the race is Stefano Modena, and he's 18th at the moment. And we've got Fukio Katayama in 19th. Pierluigi Martini is 20th. Olivier Trouillard and Ayrton Senna, well, they are 21st and 22nd, but they're both out of the race.
Well, the two Williams, the Mansell twins, the Williams twins, just now picking up speed as soon as Nigel Mansell had just set a new fastest lap. Riccardo Patrese responds and has gone 2/10 quicker. So there is a little bit of a race now developing between the two Williams drivers. Now, I wonder what the team philosophy is about this, because they've got nothing to race for. All they should be doing at this part of the race is just generally, gradually picking up the pace. But they shouldn't really be thinking about getting into a race with one another. Now, according to Riccardo Patrese, there's nothing in his contract that doesn't allow him to go out and try and win a race. Here we are back again, an incident. This is one of the two McLarens. This is Ayrton Senna pulling off.
But there's nothing drastic. Ayrton, his hand in the air, mechanical failure somewhere on the car, and he just stopped out at the Retorno corner.
Yes, that's the corner where Gerhard Berger, in fact, on Saturday afternoon had one of his more impressive offs. But Ayrton Senna sitting back, I can't say enjoying the race, but really little option to sit there and think, what am I going to do for Brazil? What are McLaren going to do for Brazil? Now the championship has all 16 races counting. It's so much more pressure for everybody, for the team, for the drivers, for the suppliers, and really making a Formula One car. People see the end product. They don't realize the amount of work and effort that a team is required to do just to service these cars, let alone to try and run them on a regular basis and at the same time introduce a new model.
Well, Nigel Mansell with another fastest lap of the race, 19.655. He's 2.5 seconds ahead of Riccardo Patrese. And I think, John, whether they're team orders or not, the fact that these two might go and race each other, I think they are racing each other at the moment, putting pressure on Nigel, that could be favourable for the people behind them.
Well, certainly these two are pulling away now very quickly from Michael Schumacher and Martin Brundle, and it's just developed into a Williams demonstration. Riccardo Patrese, I think, very anxious to, let's say, reconfirm his ability in a Williams Renault, because 3 weeks ago he received a fair amount of stick, and that performance in South Africa, which from his point of view was an adequate performance, the team were very pleased with it. But Riccardo, I think, very much in the mind to establish himself as being a driver who does justify being in such a competitive team and car as the Williams Renault team.
Nigel Mansell crossed the line for another lap. Just a couple of hundreds of seconds further ahead of Riccardo Patrese. Then the lap before, these two, Mansell and Patrese, in a class of their own. Then it's Michael Schumacher, Martin Brundle, who just drove his fastest lap of the race, and Gerhard Berger in 5th place. They're all in the 120 bracket regularly, but Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese, well, as you said, a demonstration.
Yes, Gerhard Berger currently in 5th is just half a second shy of Martin Brundle's 4th place. Now, if Berger can come out of the Peraltada corner, that's that long 180-degree corner that leads onto the start-finish line, and that very long straight. If he can just get close enough on the edge of that corner, the extra speed of the McLaren down the straight, it's possible that Berger could take Martin Brundle's 4th spot, but really, Berger has got to find the positioning in that corner, and so far we haven't been able to see Gerhard Berger get close enough to Martin Brundle, but Berger for sure will push, and there we are, in fact, Brundle and Berger. And you can see the distance between the two cars, probably something like 40 metres. It is coming up to the end of that SS section behind the track, and Brundle appears to be able to open enough of a gap in this straight down into the Peraltada and get around the corner probably slightly quicker than Berger, to therefore be able to maintain that half a second lead as he comes across the start-finish line. That's too big a gap, I think, for Berger to be able to make up. Martin Brundle head down, maybe to the last ounce of wind resistance. He's trying to cheat. Gerhard Berger trying to get into the slipstream of the Benetton. He achieved it at the very end of the straight, but of course much too late. He needs to be that distance coming onto the straight, not at the end of it, to have any hope whatsoever of being able to pass Martin Brundle.
Well, then it's a nearly 16-second gap to Jean Alesi, who's in 6th place. But Jean Alesi is like half a second in front of Mika Häkkinen, who's quicker than him on lap times. Andrea de Cesaris in 8th place is quicker than the pair of them, so we might have a nice little duo developing there.
Well, Jean Alesi, the feisty little man from Avignon, France, not at all happy with the performance of his Ferrari, but certainly giving it everything he can, and he just gathers that car up by the scruff of its neck, throws it around. He's one of those drivers who'd rather drive the car, break the car, in fact, in a race, in an attempt to at least show a good performance, a strong performance. We see Stefano Modena disappointingly coming into the pits in his Jordan Yamaha. He's had a miserable race really altogether, and I just wonder, was he involved some way with that start line shunt, and that's the significant reason for him to be, or more or less, let's say, out of the race at this stage.
To F. Mansell leading, 24 minutes, 18 laps have gone. He's on his 19th lap out of 69, another 50 laps to go in a very hot and, well, pretty humid Mexico City. Tracy still in 2nd place, now settling in 3.5 to 4 seconds behind, well, I must say, the number 1 in the Williams team. Then it's Michael Schumacher, Martin Brundle, Gerhard Berger, as you can see, in 5th place, and Jean Alesi in 6th. But look at the gap between Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi. It's over 16 seconds now.
Yes, and Gerhard Berger just trying to retain as close a contact, and here we see the view from Berger's car looking towards Martin Brundle's Benetton Ford, and that Benetton Ford basically a more nimble car through these lefts and rights into 5th gears as the final right-hander into the last left-hander that exits through the S's, and taking 6th gear now up to about 170, 175 miles an hour, dab of the brakes, down into 5th, pick up the throttle, turning in, and really was here Berger we saw one of his 3 pirouettes qualifying, or in fact it was Saturday morning on time, but Berger looking to get closer and closer to Martin Brundle, and now beginning to put himself into a position where he can take advantage of that slipstream. Brundle pulling over to the centre of the road, aware that Berger is closer this time. Can he do it? He's coming down. No, he wasn't close enough. But Martin Brundle really is going to have to be very aware indeed of Gerhard Berger behind him. That's the first sort of serious chance that Berger has had to take Martin Brundle's 4th spot.
Well, Martin Brundle, of course, the worst thing he could do is make a mistake in the Pautada, because then Berger will be all over and down that straight. The only thing maybe we can look at the moment is that both Williams are doing laps in the 121s, and the people behind them, although they're 6 seconds behind, well, Schumacher 6 seconds behind for Tracy, are all in the 120s.
Well, I don't think it means an awful lot at this stage in the race. I think it just indicates that the 2 Williams have settled down, and they may have had a few words with the pits. The pits may have said, look, stop, you 2 racing. You're in the lead. You're controlling the race, and settle into a more comfortable pace.
And Berger is closer than he was before with Martin Brundle. If he can get a good run off the Pautada, then I can see him get closer and closer down that very long straight into the Curva Moises Solana, and then Gerhard Berger could take over 4th spot, or we at least have a 5.
Well, you can see Berger gradually catching up to the back of the Benetton, but this is coming down into the braking zone. Berger having a little look again. Oh, well, Martin Brundle not really quite as decisive a fighter, but he did finally shut the door on Gerhard Berger. He really wasn't quite sure if Berger was in a position where he couldn't stop. Sometimes a driver will take a long shot and go for broke, and Martin didn't want to shut the door too early and have Gerhard Berger's McLaren clambering over the back of the Benetton Ford, but Martin still in 4th spot, Gerhard Berger on his gearbox in 5th.
Well, Martini leaving the pits just now, Pierluigi Martini with a lot of wheel spin. He changed the tyres only, apparently. He might have flat spotted them.
Well, we don't know what's happened to the tyres on his Scuderia Italia, but of course the problem that does exist, regardless of a one-tyre rule, regardless of a very conservative one-tyre rule, use the tyre too hard, particularly in this very warm conditions, you get this surface temperature into the tyre, and the tyre performance drops off. Now Berger getting closer and closer. He enters the Peraltada on a much lower line. Martin Brundle hanging up higher coming into the corner, but I think Berger has got that corner sussed better than Martin. And he is again right on the gearbox of Martin Brundle's Benetton coming down the straight. Berger getting closer and closer all the time. You can see those bits of perspex flying. Those are the tear-offs on the helmet. Martin Brundle defending his fourth spot. Gerhard Berger now realizing that he's got Martin a little bit rattled, because when a driver starts to react the way we're seeing Martin, it means that Gerhard Berger's getting under his skin.
2 laps completed at the moment here in Mexico City. Nigel Mansell and there Gerhard Berger trying to go inside of Martin Brundle into the Retorno. I don't think it was the best place to try and do it on, but
well, last year Alan Prost and the Ferrari successfully passed a lot of people into the Retorno. It's a place you're not expecting. It's a very, very bumpy part of the circuit. All your concentration really is getting the car into the corner as cleanly as possible, and it is a place that you can be caught out, and Martin Brundle hadn't really expected Gerhard Berger to make an overtaking manoeuvre at that part of the circuit. But Martin now having to look ahead of him. He's got a car ahead to lap, and he's got Gerhard Berger breathing down his back. So this is a difficult part of the lap 4. Let's see, can Martin get into the corner? Both, in fact, get into the Peraltada, cleaning that other car off into the pit lane. But it's interesting that Martin's still high, very high on the entry into the corner. Berger entering it very much lower.
Well, we can see the physical gap between Martin Brundle and Gerhard Berger. It's 0.4 of a second, and here in the slipstream you can really see it work as the last 1/3 of that straight.
Yes, Berger still not been able to get sufficiently close to Martin Brundle on the exit of the Peraltada. Of course, the problem that he has is that if he gets too close in the corner too early, he then will lose the downforce in the front of his car, and of course the front will wash out. He'll lose front end grip, and then of course he'll lose that ideal distance that he would like to be able to take advantage of the little bit of extra speed the Honda V12 engine has. But I have to say, looking at the two cars, the difference in straight line speed isn't great. It's principally because the big hole in the air that Martin Brundle's Benetton is making, Berger is taking advantage. Car off on the left-hand side. Katayama having a little pirouette again. Well, I think that's the first one we've seen from him this weekend. He had quite a few in South Africa. Back to Gerhard Berger and Martin Brundle. At this stage, sometimes it pays, if you're in Berger's position, just to back off maybe half a second, give yourself a chance to catch up, and really make a run up to Brundle rather than trying to hang in close all the way around the lap.
Well, we've done 24 laps here in Mexico City. It's Nigel Mansell leading from Riccardo Patrese in second, who just put up a new fastest lap of the race, 1:19.1. The gap 2.3 seconds. Then it's Michael Schumacher in third, 11 seconds behind Riccardo Patrese. Martin Brundle in fourth and fifth. We can see in fourth, and Gerhard Berger in fifth. We can see that gap, and we can see that fight going on. In sixth place, it's still Jean Alesi in front of Mika Häkkinen and Andrea de Cesaris. That's the situation. We'll be back after the break.
Tentar manter esta posição, porque vale mais lugar no pódio do que lugar nenhum. E, portanto, este terceiro lugar serve-lhe perfeitamente para o seu palmarés e, sobretudo, para a sua equipa. Estamos na 24ª volta, Mansell continua no comando, Patrese em segundo lugar, ele aqui vai, Schumacher, Brundle, Berger e Alesi na sexta posição.
Se mantivessem estas posições, seria a primeira ida de Michael Schumacher ao pódio de um grande prémio de Fórmula 1. No entanto, estamos numa fase muito inicial da corrida, com 25 voltas cumpridas neste momento, e Mansell a reagir um pouco ao ataque de Patrese, 3,1 segundo, certamente a diferença que se verificou agora nas voltas entre os dois pilotos. Mansell ganha 8 décimos de segundo, cerca de 8 décimos de segundo ao seu companheiro de equipa. Pode ter sido motivado por qualquer dificuldade na dobragem por parte de Patrese, que aliás também perdeu um pouco de terreno para o Michael Schumacher. Esse centro Brundle parece estar em condições de sacudir um pouquinho a pressão exercida sobre ele pelo Gerhard Berger. Um segundo é agora a diferença entre Brundle e Berger. Brundle faz a sua melhor volta nesta
City with Nigel Mansell still leading after 25 laps, Riccardo Patrese in second and Michael Schumacher still in third place. Out of the race at the start already we saw Ivan Capelli and Carl Wendlinger being victims of a big tangle in midfield. Ayrton Senna is out, Olivier Grouillard we saw with a blown engine, and Stefano Modena we saw, well, about 10 laps ago going back into the pits, and also Mauricio Guzmin who was out after 2 laps. Well, Nigel Mansell leading, John, the man we can keep our eyes open for at the moment, who's doing competitive lap times, who come up from 16th place and is currently in 8th, is Andrea de Cesaris.
Andrea, yes, a repeat performance we saw in South Africa. He was one of the very few people that was able to pass on the racetrack, and he's one of the very few people that has been overtaking here in Mexico City. And Andrea really doing a fantastic job for the Tyrrell with that V10 Ilmor engine. And one of the few, let's say, out-and-out racers in Formula One. He's got a lot of experience, and passing, it's a skill that some drivers develop, some never develop. But Andrea doing a very, very good job indeed. Currently now just 0.3 of a second behind Mika Hakkinen, and then John Alesi, well, he's a further 17 seconds ahead of Mika Hakkinen. But we expect to see Andrea de Cesaris stealing Mika Hakkinen in 7th place, well, really sometime at the end of this lap.
Well, it's Alesi, Hakkinen and de Cesaris are actually within a second and a half. It's 18 seconds between Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi. Berger still trying to get past Martin Brundle, but he's losing some time. Of course, the first 3 still Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese and Michael Schumacher. And the Mansellisti, well, for the moment, they can be very happy people indeed.
There we have. Well, this is a little bit of a tight situation. Martin Brundle got through cleanly. Michele Alboreto had to shut the door on Gerhard Berger. Gerhard Berger will not be at all impressed with that. But he can use the footwork of Mugen to tow him down the straight. And although Berger was the loser in that situation, well, in fact, look at that. The V10 still out dragging the new V12. But Berger not very happy with that, overtaking and lapping Michele Alboreto and the footwork. But in fact, that's the give and take. You win some, you lose some. And it's not a bad thing, I would say, for Berger to have lost a little bit of time, because the gap will allow him to make a little bit of a charge back up. The worst thing you can do is sit behind another car, and then you get locked into that situation. You need to have the momentum to pass somebody. Sitting behind them lap after lap, all it does is you then end up running at the speed of the car you want to pass, drop back, and then have a little bit of a charge up to him. And I hope that Berger now, through really Michele Alboreto having to get his line through the Peraltada corner, will encourage Gerhard Berger to do so.
Well, you said Andrea de Cesaris, and the end of the last lap would be in the gearbox of Mika Hakkinen. Well, he's past Mika Hakkinen now, so Andrea de Cesaris up to 7th from 16th, and he can try and get past Jean Alesi, the one and only remaining Ferrari, and in 6th place. Well, it's not really a position where we expect Ferraris to be. And everybody up to 13th place, and that is Thierry Boutsen, is 1 lap down, which means Eric Comas is the last unlapped runner in 12th place. He's right behind Johnny Herbert, who's behind Gianni Morbidelli, and in 9th place it's JJ Layton.
Nigel Mansell now with virtually a 6-second lead over Riccardo Patrese. That little spurt Patrese put on in the earlier part of the race now, that tide is opening it up again, and Mansell gradually easing away. And Patrese, Mansell, of course, completely in control of this race. Michael Schumacher in 3rd place, presently 10 seconds behind Riccardo Patrese. So, other than reliability, this situation is fait accompli for Mansell and Patrese.
Well, now it's the top 6 is unchanged, but it's Andrea de Cesaris coming up to Jean Alesi at this moment, John. And this morning during the warm-up, Andrea de Cesaris was way quicker than Jean Alesi down that long straight. And we've seen Andrea de Cesaris all weekend being among the fastest drivers on that main straight. And here we see the battle, the number 27 of Jean Alesi, the French, well, I think I should say number 1 man at Ferrari at the moment, just in front of Andrea De Cesaris, and they're both trying to let Ukio Katayama, who's driving a sensible race.
Now let's just watch what Andrea see. Again, he enters the corner lower than Alesi, and if he can get through the corner and retain the gap between himself and Alesi, that extra speed that Tyrrell has to look perfect position. And Andrea about to pull out, come alongside the Ferrari, and there's not very much John Alesi can do. Andrea De Cesaris, an absolutely perfect overtaking position and manoeuvre, and John Alesi really just a passenger in that situation. That, if you like, is a competent overtaking manoeuvre.
Means that De Cesaris is into the points and Alesi out of the points.
What I think that indicates also is the way that the Tyrrell team approach racing as opposed to approaching qualifying and practicing. And by reducing the wing angle on the car, taking downforce out of the car, the important place to be quick here is at the end of the straight. And since when Andrea was starting, he started fairly well down the field anyway, so he had nothing to lose. Andrea was starting in 11th on the grid, so he had really nothing to lose. And to go for the lower downforce setup meant at least he would have the speed at the end of the straight to pass people. And of course it's worked perfectly for him. And already he's pulled out almost a second on Jean Alesi. Now the next man he has in the sights will be Gerhard Berger.
Berger a long way ahead of Andrea De Cesaris, some 18 seconds between the Austrian and the Italian. Nigel Mansell at the moment taking control of this race. If he didn't have it yet, he's got it now. He's got the fastest lap of the race, a 19.129, still a long way off his qualifying time, but that's done with low fuel, special fuel, and of course, well, different situations. Mansell 6.7 seconds ahead of Riccardo Patrese, and that's Gianni Morbidelli off into the tires. That's the second of the Minardi Lamborghinis out, because Christian Fittipaldi put his in the sand trap in the Peraltada, and now Morbidelli.
Yes, both of the Minardi Lamborghinis parked very neatly in the sand trap at the Peraltada, so a sad day and a bad day for the Minardi team. And really, that corner's the change in angle of the banking in the corner, and particularly on the entry to the corner, proving to be very difficult indeed. And if you are marginally offline, and that's why I was not very comfortable watching Martin Brundle and others entering the corner of Jean Alesi, likewise on the high side, it seems to me that purely from comfort and safety point of view, entering on a slightly softer, in other words, slightly lower line would be the way to go.
Now the fastest lap of Nigel Mansell, 1:19.030. Riccardo Patrese some 8.5 seconds behind his team leader. Michael Schumacher, I think, is settling in nicely in that third place, and we see a big blow-up right in front of us. Who it was, we can't see. We see a lot of cloud, and I'm sure the director will, in a minute, show us who it was. I hope it's not one of the front runners. Maybe it's one of the people just being lapped.
We think it might have been Michele Alboreto when the footwork of Mugen, but we have yet to see. Here we are. No, it's not. It's Jean Alesi and his Ferrari. Well, one has to say it's not a big surprise to see the Ferrari with its engine hemorrhaging heavily. Look at that, the engine breathing smoke coming out of the right-hand bank of the engine. They've had all sorts of problems with their engines, and that's only one of the smaller problems the team has got. So really another very disappointing day for all the millions of people worldwide that support the Ferrari team. And I have to say, it's very easy to snipe and shoot at Ferrari, but Formula One needs Ferrari, and particularly when Ferrari are competitive.
Ferrari, the most successful Formula One team in Formula One history. Nigel Mansell is trying to be the most successful Englishman in Formula One history, John.
Yes, he is. And in fact, he is the most successful English Formula One Grand Prix driver. And he really wants to win that very coveted World Championship. And the way Mansell has approached 1992, one has to say he is looking extremely strong. Not only is Mansell looking strong, the Williams Renault team also are really, they've come with a new car, active ride suspension, further advances on the gearbox, and really, well, who's going to beat them?
To this race, we've done 33 out of 69 laps, and now Riccardo Patrese got the fastest lap of the race. He's responding to Nigel Mansell. Little 5-lap spur when he went quicker lap after lap. He's still some 8.8 seconds behind, but then it's Michael Schumacher who's comfortable third. Fourth will still be Martin Brundle, and then it's Gerhard Berger in 5th place. Now we miss John Alesi in 6th.
Well, John Alesi, of course, is out. Andrea de Cesaris in 6th spot. But Gerhard Berger back to 0.2 of a second behind Martin Brundle. So Martin, again, getting a lot of attention from the red and white nose of Berger's Marlboro Honda McLaren. But the difference in time between Berger and Brundle on the circuit it's just fluctuating, really. You get one has a quicker lap than the other, one lap, and it reverts back. But Riccardo Patrese here coming through the S's, 8.8 seconds behind Nigel Mansell, although he's just completed the fastest lap so far in the race, not having any significant impact on Mansell's lead. And Mansell, I'm very confident, can respond at any point in the race he chooses to do so. And if you look back to South Africa, when at the end of the race he threw in some very quick laps, he did those laps solely for himself. He just said, well, I know the car's capable of lapping even faster, but I didn't want to risk anything. So Mansell, with a 9-second stranglehold on that lead. Martin Brundle currently in 4th. Berger dropped back again. That's over a second now behind Martin Brundle. Maybe that was due to traffic. One of the difficulties with the Mexico circuit is that around the back, through those S's, there really isn't anywhere to pass. And if you get caught behind a slower car, really you've got to wait until that car either waves you through, moves offline, or else you just can get a clean shot to get past.
Well, Gerhard Berger, of course, has sweet memories of Mexico. He won his very first Grand Prix here in the Benetton BMW back in 1986. But now he's got to do with 5th place, behind Martin Brundle, who has been overshadowed by Michael Schumacher in South Africa. But he's come into his own and he's driving a very good race indeed.
Yes, this is the kind of race Martin would like. He just wants to get a finish. He was obviously very disappointed with South Africa and all the attention that Michael Schumacher has brought to the Benetton team and to Schumacher himself. It's very difficult as you're an established Grand Prix driver. You get your first really, really good chance in a competitive team, and your teammate is just so outstanding as Schumacher is. But Martin's probably one of the better race drivers in Grand Prix racing today, and this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a very mature race from Martin Brundle. He's under constant pressure from Gerhard Berger. He hasn't made a mistake, and he's really making Berger work very hard indeed. If he was that 4th place, he's going to have to earn it. It ain't going to be given up.
As in South Africa, we see Eric Comas just in front of Thierry Boutsen. Comas, who scraped in at the very last grid position, 26th. He had some problems during that second qualifying session, but he worked his way up and is in front of the Belgian in the Ligier Renault. And we've talked about it this morning, John. It's all about the package has got to be right. The driver, the engine, well, the car, everything has got to be 100%. And, well, the Ligier Renault isn't just as good a package as the Williams Renault at the moment.
Well, there's nothing like it. In fact, it's the extremes of performance. We saw in South Africa, referring back there again, where we had a very smooth track, that the Ligier Renault, in fact, appeared to improve quite significantly throughout the weekend. But here in Mexico, on a very bumpy track, the car is just nowhere at all. And that's the difference between the two Renault engine cars. The Williams is superb in comparison over the bumps. And really Ligier, now that this whole Alan Prost saga has finally ended up with Prost and Ligier, Renault and all the other associated sponsors and managers not being able to come to an agreement, the team really needed Alan Prost as a driver and as a test driver. And he could have brought undoubtedly very many benefits to the team. But they've now got to live with Thierry Boutsen and Eric Comas, both two good drivers, but not as successful or as complete a driver as Alan Prost is.
Well, we're over half distance distance in the second Grand Prix of the 1992 season, and it's Nigel Mansell leading. Actually, the top 6 is exactly the same as the last time we gave it to you. Mansell, Patrese, Schumacher, Brundle, Berger and the Cesaris. And the Cesaris at the moment, I think he's going to have a very hard time getting up to Gerhard Berger.
Well, in fact, I think Andrea's got as far as he's going to go, because his progress towards Berger has now stopped. In fact, it's actually gone backwards very slightly. And I think 6th place for Andrea de Cesaris is about the best he's going to have, unless something happens to the cars ahead of him. But nonetheless, a great effort from Andrea to come from so far down the grid.
Well, he actually dropped down to 16th on that very first lap.
Yep.
I mean, he's gained 10 places.
Again, he was probably one of the victims of that start line kerfuffle. But he's a great little racer now, and justifying his position very much in the Tyrrell team. That's interesting that Tyrrell, you know, he didn't have a lot of choice in his driver lineup for 1992. Andrea came in, really he gazumped Zanardi for that seat. Zanardi had all but signed to drive for Tyrrell this year, and Andrea managed to, through his contacts and sponsorship areas, kick out Zanardi and place himself. But with hindsight, it's not been a bad decision. Andrea doing a great job for Ken Tyrrell.
Well, engine, Alessandro Zanardi landing half on his feet, can we say, by signing a test contract with Benetton for the moment.
Yes, indeed, it's a very handy place for Zanardi to be as a test driver, because with the new V12 Ford engine ready for chassis running, and with both Schumacher and Brundle involved in maintaining the competitiveness of the V8 car, no bad thing for Zanardi to be in a very competitive team with 2 young charging, well, let's say Schumacher certainly is young, Martin now quite old in the late 20s, early 30s. So a good place for Zanardi to go.
Well, there we see Michael Schumacher's pit board. It says place 3, and you're about 6.8 seconds in front of your teammate Martin Brundle. Schumacher doing, well, I suppose what he's expected to do, John. I mean, he said in the interview earlier, people compare me with Ayrton Senna. I'm not, I'm Michael Schumacher. But having said that, the man is driving a sterling race. You can't expect maybe from him to win the Grand Prix, but being the third driver behind the all-conquering Williams, I think is absolutely fantastic.
Yes, that's what you'd expect of Schumacher, but really, Martin Brundle he's maintaining the distance now between himself and Schumacher, and one mustn't forget that Martin has been overshadowed very much in the first 2 races, and at the end of the day, both drivers now are running at about the same speed. Gives great reassurance to the Benetton team.
Well, there we see Riccardo Patrese. Well, look at the distance there is between second and third. It's over 10-second gap at the moment, and the last man, everybody up to Johnny Herbert in 8th place at the moment, is lapped, and that is one of the Von Metals, Andrea Chiesa, who spun off during his first Grand Prix. He failed to qualify in South Africa, but he qualified quite comfortable here, as did teammate Gabriele Tarquini, who was 14th on the grid. This is Chiesa, the Swiss. Well, I think the man is a competent little driver, and he was doing a good job. And the Von Metal team, I think, John, is a little bit of an underrated team, to be honest.
Yeah, they've had a lot of ups and downs. They were originally the Osella team, probably underfinanced. They've now, I think, secured reasonable finance. They've got the best engine a small team can have. That's the Ford HB. And really it's down to the team, to the design side of the team. Sergio Rinland now working with the team. He's got a new car coming very shortly, and one has to say the package is about ideal for a team of that size and structure. Look at Nigel Mansell there. I mean, you'd think he's out for Sunday afternoon drive. I know he hates to have people say how easy it is for him, and he likes to feel that really his contribution to his success is as great as that of the car. But really, this is what television does. It really diminishes the effort that the driver makes. It looks so easy. And sitting back, all you people at home watching this on Eurosport Live cannot imagine, in fact, what the forces are like to drive a modern-day Grand Prix car. The lateral G loads, the braking loads, just unbelievable. And going across the bumps right here, now the Williams rides it so well, but in some of the other cars out there, it's appalling. But Nigel having a very easy day, in reality, in his Williams Renault, and he's just sitting there. You can see very easy into each corner, feeling the car in. There's no panic. Oh, very, very much in control. You can just about hear the engine. Up, down, Mansell just caressing the throttle. Changing gear, of course, on the steering wheel. The two levers, one on either side of the steering wheel. Fourth, fifth. Coming up, taking sixth gear now on this final straight before we come to the Peraltada. And watch Mansell's entry. We didn't get a very good view, unfortunately. We got the top six placings, but it's interesting to watch from the in-car camera the different lines that Mansell, Patrese, Berger were taking in the Peraltada corner. Mansell, for me, is the man who, in fact, has got that corner sussed better than anybody else. It was in this corner that he really seemed to pick up the extra time he had in qualifying, and visually it was obvious. Mansell doing really a tremendous job for himself, for his team, for his sponsors, and well, I don't know who's going to be able to stop him in the first half of this season.
Well, it might look like a Sunday afternoon drive. It's not. He's put in another fastest lap of the race, but undoubtedly, John, it's easier than I remember someone starting on a street circuit on the last row of the grid and still win a race.
Yes, on that day the car worked really well also. Look at Gerhard Berger now has actually... Oh, he's got him. Yeah, Martin, look at that. Oh, Jimmy, are they going to collide? No. Well, I tell you, gutsy performance from Martin Brundle. He was passed, but Berger put himself into a position in which he allowed Martin to respond by coming up underneath him again. That's a really feisty performance. Gerhard Berger finally, after 41 laps, managed to get ahead of Martin Brundle, but for about 20 yards, Brundle took it back. In fact, as they came into the corner, right front and Brundle, left rear, and Berger, gentle kiss, no damage to either car. But Berger worked very, very hard indeed for that fourth spot. Here we see it again. Berger up alongside Brundle. Brundle fighting every inch, well, in fact, I don't think they did touch, but Berger overran the corner, and Brundle dived behind him. Then Berger responded, but he had to eventually lift off to allow Brundle to dive across the front of him. Good stuff, bit of motor racing. We haven't seen too much of that so far in this year's Mexican Grand Prix. And look, the momentum again has worked for Martin Brundle. And now he's got one of the leaders ahead of him. Berger again will be in a position, not at the end of this lap, but coming up a couple of laps time to try and do a similar maneuver. This time, make sure he doesn't overrun the corner. But in fact, for Brundle, the situation now is slightly disadvantageous. He's got both the leaders ahead of him. They're probably going to not be aware of that. Brundle will want to get through as quickly as possible. Brundle may have to be a little bit forceful in the overtaking of Thierry Boots, going down to the Retorno. And this is going to work completely to Berger's advantage, because he will be able to get close to the back of Brundle's Benetton. Brundle sits steaming in his helmet, screaming at Thierry Boots to get out of the way, or whatever you might use. The language may not be quite as polite as that. But Gerhard Berger loving every minute of this little situation. This is the give and take of motor racing. This is, for me, what Grand Prix racing is about.
Yeah, we saw earlier Michele Alboreto giving little advantage to Martin Brundle, and now Brundle or Berger can take a little bit of an advantage. He might even try and take it into the Peraltada, John.
I don't think it's the right place to try it, but he's certainly having a go, and he's stuck the nose up the inside because of... Oh, what a great pass. What an amazing pass. And Martin Brundle had to concede the corner. Berger took the advantage. He had the momentum coming out of the final left-hander up out of the S's. Great overtaking maneuver. He remembered 2 years ago when Nigel Mansell did the very same thing to him towards the end of the race. And now Berger has got the advantage. He's got past Thierry Boots. Martin Brundle is yet to do so. That's good racing, good intelligent reading of a situation, and I'm sure Martin is really displeased with that little piece of team driving from the two Ligier drivers. Unintentional, of course, they're both involved in their own race, but when they see leading cars come up to them, they should make every effort to get out of the way, let those two cars, Brundle and Berger, go through. Well, Gerhard Berger now in fourth spot, Martin Brundle back to fifth. And I wonder, has Martin got anything left? Can he respond? Right now, it doesn't look to be the case, really. Brundle still caught behind Thierry Boots, and in the meantime, Gerhard Berger pulling away. Here we see it. Oh, this is Nigel Mansell.
There we see it.
There we see it now. And that was a gutsy move. Martin Brundle could not afford to get any higher in that corner because it is slippery out there. And in fact, he probably got his two left-hand wheels onto the slippery part of the corner. He had to get right out of the throttle, check the car, keep it on the line. And a very, very tense moment for both drivers.
Well, so we've got 44 laps run in this Mexican Grand Prix. Nigel Mansell, of course, still leading. He's 11 seconds ahead of Riccardo Patrese. Michael Schumacher is in third. Gerhard Berger is in fourth now. Martin Brundle in fifth place. And Andrea de Cesaris is still in sixth. We'll be back with more after the break.
McLaren Honda, no entanto, nas voltas seguintes é que vamos verificar se o Martin Brundle poderá ou não reagir.
E vamos agora com o Ricardo Patrese na imagem, é o segundo classificado. Ele está a 11,8 segundos de Nigel Mansell, que é o líder dele da primeira volta.
Alguns problemas de caixa de velocidades para Gabriele Tarquini aqui na passagem em frente das boxes.
E tudo indica, pelo menos até este momento, confirma-se a grande superioridade destes dois carros, do Renault, do Nigel Mansell e do Ricardo Patrese. Mansell acaba de completar esta volta. Ele fez esta volta em 1:18.622. É um belíssimo tempo, é uma reação forte do Mansell em relação ao Patrese, que está a 20 segundos, mais de 20 segundos, a 14 segundos do Nigel Mansell. Ele fez esta volta em 1:20. E com a estabilização destas posições, Mansell, Patrese, Schumacher, vamos passar de novo aos estúdios em Lisboa para compromissos comerciais daqui da Cidade do México, do Autódromo Hermanos Rodrigues. Atenção, Lisboa.
Tarquini sta andando un po' piano però rispetto a quello che è l'andatura delle altre vetture, anche quelle non competitive come la Williams Renault.
Sì, Gabriele Tarquini dopo. Riccardo Patrese, Michael Schumacher, Gerhard Berger, Martin Brundle and Andrea de Cesaris. But if we look down, John, we see the Benetton pit and the Williams pit both ready for tyre changes.
Yes, well, I think we're going to see Riccardo Patrese coming in. His left front tyre, I've noticed throughout the race, it's had a dark band towards the outside of the tyre. Now that may have been graining, that might have been just pushing too hard, but the Williams pits are prepared for a pit stop, and if it's going to be anybody, in my mind, it's going to be Patrese. Likewise, the Benetton team are prepared for pit stops, and if it's going to be one of their two cars, it's going to be, well, it is going to be one of their two cars, obviously, more likely to be Martin Brundle. And of course, when those two cars, if they do make a pit stop, the advantage they give is to Mansell and Schumacher. The team will be able to measure the tyre wear, or what the problem might be is it's just literally wear. I can't believe it is wear, because Goodyear predicted virtually zero wear in this race. It may just be this factor of running too hard on the tyre, and it's begun to shear the rubber off the tyre surface and therefore losing performance.
Well, it's interesting to see, I think, what the time is at Martin Brundle's doing. He's back into the 120s, and Gerhard Berger is into the 119s, and a very low 119s, so 19.259 at the moment. But it's interesting to see what Andrea de Cesaris is doing. He's doing it roughly the same time. He's 18 seconds behind Martin Brundle. So I think that fifth place is fairly safe for Martin Brundle, bar any mechanical problems. But the top six unchanged, and Mansell completing his 47th out of 69 laps.
Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese.
Now this is Mansell, and yes, it's not Riccardo Patrese.
No. But both really in a very comfortable situation in this race. Mansell some 15 seconds now ahead of Riccardo Patrese, who himself is some 27 seconds now ahead of Michael Schumacher. 14 seconds, I beg your pardon, ahead of Michael Schumacher. Andrea de Cesaris in the remaining Tyrrell Ilmore, again running at the same pace as Martin Brundle. The gap between himself and Brundle is 18 seconds.
Of course, Andrea de Cesaris, 167 Grand Prix.
Yes, but the man really we want to be watching, in fact, is Gerhard Berger. He's now broken into the 1 minute 18 second barrier. He's closed the gap to Michael Schumacher to 9.9 seconds, so he is the man on the charge.
Well, we look at Andrea de Cesaris, who done a 119.3 and is now 17.4 seconds behind Martin Brundle. That means with just over 20 laps, 22 laps to go, it is possible so we might have a grandstand finish.
Well, certainly Andreas going quicker than Brundle is at the stage. Of course, Benetton as a team would have to make a decision if Brundle wanted to come in for fresh tyres. How much time would a fresh set of tyres give Brundle against the time it takes to come into the pits? And the pit entry here in Mexico is very long and it's not particularly quick. Unlike, say, South Africa, where it was a very fast in and out pit lane, here the time lost coming in would be probably too punitive.
Well, and if we go through the top, it's virtually unchangeable, I would say. But the thing I think we could emphasize on, John, is that if Andrea de Cesaris didn't have his engine problem, there's Martin Brundle slowing down. The top six is changing. Martin Brundle slowing down, and there is Andrea de Cesaris overtaking him. So the Cesaris up to 5th place now. Mika Häkkinen should go up to 6th, but Martin Brundle, a sad end to a very good-looking weekend.
Yes, it was. This is not the ending Martin hoped for. He was running very strongly in 4th for over the first half of the race. Then finally Gerhard Berger managed to take his 4th spot. Then once Berger passed him, Martin seemed to lose a little bit of steam, and now ultimately he's out of the race. Looks probably like a mechanical or more probably an electronic problem. Here we have Gerhard Berger in 4th spot. The gap between himself and Michael Schumacher seesawing between 9.5 and 10.5 seconds.
Well, the problem for Berger, of course, is that the laps are running out. We've got 20 laps to go in this Grand Prix. In Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese, Michael Schumacher and Gerhard Berger. That's a top 4. I think a sterling drive, to say, from Andrea de Cesaris, John. And then it's the Lotus twins, Häkkinen and Herbert. And we thought last night when we saw Johnny, we said, well, a points finish, could it be on? It's unlikely, more unlikely than South Africa, but it looks on the cards.
Well, Johnny Herbert's in 7th spot, so Mika Häkkinen with him, so the two Lotus drivers could well pick up those final 1 point, 2 points. Still quite a long way to go, although it's into the second half and well into the second half of the race. It's a very hard race, physically hard, mechanically hard. Michael Schumacher now really just consolidating his 3rd spot. Still 10 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. And Berger probably having shot the best part of his bulls in this race, trying to get past Martin Brundle. His tyres will have taken the toll of being behind Brundle for such a long time. And although he made a little bit of a response once he got past Brundle, he's now settled back into that 10-second deficit to Michael Schumacher.
And we see Schumacher behind Michele Alboreto in the only starting footwork Mugen. Well, he's taken it easy after the parallel tire. He'll undoubtedly slipstream past Alboreto.
Yes, again, footwork have taken a lot of wing off their car. To be quick down the straight, it was a deliberate ploy. They felt they had nothing to lose. And that was why we saw Berger having trouble getting past Michele Alboreto on the straight. And Michael Schumacher may have to wait until either the very end of the straight or somewhere around the back of the circuit, because I suspect that the footwork is that a bit marginally faster at the end of the straight. Johnny Herbert currently in 7th spot in his Lotus. Really a great effort from this team, a very small team in its 2nd year really since its reformation under Peter Collins' management. And of course Johnny Herbert's done a fantastic job in the few races in 91, as did Mika Häkkinen, and now these two young lads. It's refreshing to see two young guys who actually get out and race. It's something we don't always see from Formula One drivers, but those two young guys are chargers and they just race the wheels off their car. And if they both had more competitive machinery, it would be very interesting to see just how far up they could get on the grid.
Well, I think we could see that from Barcelona onwards, when the new Lotus 107 should be ready. Johnny Herbert, incidentally, his best Grand Prix result was his debut race from Benetton in 1989.
Yes, and of course he had that very difficult period with Benetton. He had a wonderful result in Brazil, then things turned sour, and it ended up with him being replaced by Emanuele Pirro. And Johnny then went and raced in Japan in Formula 3000. And then with Peter Collins at Lotus, he came back in and did some guest drives at Lotus. Some tremendous drives, in my opinion. Now a full-time Lotus driver and fully justifying his inclusion in the team.
We're looking at Okio Katayama at the moment. Katayama, who won last year's Japanese Formula 3000 Championship, and he was included in the Venturi LaRousse Lamborghini team. A lot of people thought just because of, well, more money he would bring to the team than his talent, but, well, he's not a bad low pedaler, so to say, John.
He's getting used to racing in Europe. It's quite a difficult transition for Japanese drivers coming to Europe. There are so many different things, just the culture, the food, the way of life, and to settle into a European team as well. It takes time, and Katayama, I think, when he gets a number of races, can be seen to be maybe a very useful member of that team.
Well, he qualified 24th here in Mexico, and he's holding his own. He's still going around. We saw him spin once this weekend, and that was in the race, while Nigel Mansell just left the man in 6th place at the moment, and that's Mika Häkkinen. And the fastest lap of the race is just run on this lap by Riccardo Patrese, but Patrese is 14.4 seconds behind Nigel Mansell, and he's 14.5 seconds in front of Michael Schumacher, who's 9.2 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. Berger a little bit closer, but with, oh, it's 17 laps to go.
I think the difference in time between Schumacher and Berger really comes with who gets the break in the traffic on a particular point of a lap. Both cars are running more or less identical lap speeds. In fact, Berger's lap time, his fastest lap on that last lap, virtually identical to the fastest lap of the race. So they're not just sitting there swanning around, they are all trying very hard indeed. But Nigel Mansell really got this race absolutely under his control. He can lap in 1 minute 18s if he wants. He can lap in 1 minute 20. He can just seesaw completely at his pleasure.
And Mika Häkkinen on that lap was a good 2 seconds slower than Nigel, John. Now we know the Lotus is 43 kilos overweight. Now 43 kilos, what would that mean in time? Roughly.
Probably means too much, but I would think 43 kilos in a lap, something like about 0.3 of a second. Doesn't sound very much. Multiplied by 69, somebody I'm sure can work that figure out. And that's the penalty of weight. Weight is the scourge of a racing car. Virtually all these modern, say, contemporary Formula 1 cars are on the 505 kilo limit. The Lotus really is a very old Grand Prix car. The design of that car goes back really to 1988 when Nelson Piquet drove with the Judd V8 engine in it. It's really, the legacy is very, very close indeed. And they're paying the penalty of having that slightly heavy car. The advantage that they have got is the Ford HB engine, which is a very, very light package, a very simple and easily installed package. So when Lotus do get a car on the weight limit, as they undoubtedly will do, we can expect to see better performance. And it's not even just the weight. Chris Murphy, who's now designing that car at Lotus, hopefully will come up with a more efficient and aerodynamic car than the current Lotus that Häkkinen and Johnny Herbert are doing such a good job with.
You're looking at the places 7th until 12th with Bertrand Gachot in 11th, 2 laps down. Gachot, well, he qualified really well, but in the race he seems to have gone backwards a little bit. A promising weekend was looking for the Belgian, but, well, it doesn't always work the way you want it to work. It certainly works the way for Nigel Mansell at the moment, so 14 seconds ahead of his teammate.
And just look at that, I mean, from that, well, they had, I'm about to say how, graceful it looks, and then he lets the back of the car step out. But basically, Nigel has got everything under control. He's just sitting there, up and down on the throttle ever so gently, changing gear. Really, this is a very, very easy race for Nigel Mansell. Undoubtedly, he'll want to tell us afterwards, if he does win the race, that he did have a few moments, but that's characteristic of the man, and it does not take anything away from his performance whatsoever.
Well, we can see the gap here between Mansell. Well, we didn't even see the gap between Mansell and Patrese there. The man at the moment in 4th spot, and after 3 spins and shunts yesterday, 4th place for Gerhard Berger. I think it's the best he could have hoped for, to be honest, but, well, it's 3 points in the bag for the McLaren team towards the Constructors' Championship, and now is the question, how quick can they get that new MP47 working as good as the Williams is at the moment?
Well, Gerhard really is trying to redeem his reputation, which he rather lost on Saturday morning, then in the afternoon, and of course McLaren team having one of the worst weekends in their memory, and Berger can bring this car home in 4th spot. Well, it's 3 points, as you say. Those points are important for for the Constructors' Championship, and Gerhard Berger, in fact, picking up the pace, going quicker and quicker, has just recorded the quickest lap in the race with a 1 minute 18.320. Of course, the two Williams, who are well ahead of him, in first and second place, are able now to just control the pace very much from the front. Gerhard Berger a long, long way back from Patrese, and an even longer way back from Nigel Mansell, but he's out there pushing. If he can get his McLaren onto third spot, Gerhard Berger some 14 seconds now behind Michael Schumacher, but Schumacher responding instantly with a 18.4 anyway, so Schumacher not about to give up third spot to Gerhard Berger.
So interesting about that 18.3 that Gerhard Berger is doing, he qualified on an 18.5.
That's a factor of the racetrack, Allard. Here in Mexico, the track picks up grip all through the weekend and throughout the race, and in fact last year we saw Nigel Mansell set a new lap record, which was virtually the equal of Patrese's qualifying lap, the lap record of 16.9. That of course was with the more banked Peraltado corner, and of course with slightly more competitive tyres from Goodyear. The Goodyear tyre situation in 92 is very conservative. It's a one-tyre formula, and they produce a tyre that really is very, very conservative indeed. There's no need to do anything else.
Well, you saw the caption that Patrese was having the fastest lap of the race. No, Gerhard Berger come past start finish and goes another 2 tenths quicker than Riccardo Patrese. The fastest lap of the race is back with Gerhard Berger, and well, he's on the charge too. Michael Schumacher, but 9.3 seconds with just over 10 laps to go to the finish. I think I'm sure it's too much unless something happens to Michael Schumacher. He's got 31 seconds in hand over Andrea de Cesaris, and I still think Andrea is driving a sterling race, and then the Lotus twins.
Yep, but everything really has settled into the final few laps of this race. Gerhard Berger pushing very hard indeed, but the Benetton pits will keep Michael Schumacher informed of every move that Berger is making. Of course, they've got two-way radio communication, but that's normally only used by the driver if he's got a problem, or by the pits when the driver is in view. The worst thing you want is somebody coming on to you in the middle of the Peraltado corner to tell you that somebody's catching you up. The concentration that you require to get through that corner quickly and cleanly is pretty deep.
Oh, we've got Nigel Mansell, 12 seconds lead over Riccardo Patrese. Then it's Michael Schumacher in third, Gerhard Berger in fourth, Andrea de Cesaris in fifth place, Mika Hakkinen in sixth, and Johnny Herbert in seventh place. That's the situation with 12 laps to go here in Mexico City. You're looking at the leader of the race and on his way to probably another Grand Prix win. You can see it here on Eurosport after the break.
Efetivamente a sua melhor volta, Berger aproximou-se do tempo que tinha realizado na passagem anterior, mas estão todos com 1 minuto 18 segundos e 2 décimos. Depois há mais alguns milésimos, as diferenças são mínimas no ritmo dos 4 homens da frente, e daí que as posições continuem perfeitamente estabilizadas e que não haja qualquer motivo para se pensar que possa haver mudanças entre os 4 primeiros ou que haja qualquer mudança de pneus. Mas, de qualquer forma, o Patrese aproximou-se um pouco do Nigel Mansell nas últimas voltas, no entanto está a 12,6 segundos, é uma diferença grande, faltam 11 voltas. Isso significa que o Patrese teria que ganhar mais do que 1 segundo por volta para chegar junto do Nigel Mansell. Pois é, José Miguel, era outro problema.
Pois é, José Miguel, mas é que certamente o Nigel Mansell não...
Here in Mexico City, we're riding with the leader of the race and the man who led the race from the start up till his 59th lap, and when he crosses start finish, he's got 10 laps to go, Nigel Mansell. Well, we thought the rate of attrition in this race, John, was going to be much higher than it actually is. If we discount Capelli and Wendlinger, who got off at the start, we haven't seen that many retirements on a circuit, which is very bumpy. And as you said earlier, that Mika Hakkinen and other people have said, it's probably one of the toughest Grand Prix of the year.
Very tough indeed. It's certainly very tough physically. Mechanically it's hard as well. This long straight, engine sitting flat out, maximum revs for virtually 3/4 of a mile, and it's just the temperature, of course, as well, being high up 7,000 feet above sea level. Temperature is always going to be on the limit, and here sometimes exceeds that limit. So it is a very hard race for the cars, for the drivers. But here we are with Nigel Mansell making it look really so easy. And Mansell I'm sure experiencing all the emotions and all the physical loads that he knows are very tough indeed. But with such a comfortable lead, his lead's down to just under 12 seconds, but that's because he has dropped off the pace. It's not as if Patrese is actually going to go and catch him.
Well, Patrese just put in a new lap record of 1:17.920, but it's a bit academic, I suppose.
Yes, I mean, Mansell's got the whole situation well under control, and really Riccardo Patrese, as hard as he might try on these remaining 10 laps, isn't going to make any serious inroads into Mansell's lead. But it's situations like that really that are worrying for Mansell more than Riccardo Patrese. You can just find yourself caught up with a slower car, lose the rhythm, maybe overrun into a corner or something, and that's where really one has to be very, very careful. But Mansell coming across the start-finish line.
9 laps to go. Well, he lost there some time, we can see that on the monitor, but I mean that was because he was behind Ukio Katayama, who was just, well, in those S's committed.
Yes, and look at that Andrea de Cesaris closing the door on Mansell. Mansell came out alongside de Cesaris, waiting for de Cesaris to give him the corner. Andrea just shut across him. Those are the situations that can catch you out, even at this stage. So Mansell really has to be very cautious with the cars he's lapping. Sometimes they don't see you coming through. Sometimes you catch that blind spot in the mirrors. When a driver is committed to a line, he really has to go forward, and what an awful thing it would have been to see Mansell getting his nose clipped by Andrea's right rear wheel. Mansell was prepared for that eventuality, drop back and let Andrea take the corner.
Well, another fastest lap of the race by Gerhard Berger, 1:17.711, taking away the fastest lap, just put up by Riccardo Patrese. The men were looking at 10.9 seconds, the gap between Mansell and Patrese, but when Nigel crosses the line, which is, well, any moment now I would say, there he was. He's got 8 laps to the finish, and his 23rd Grand Prix victory, and the second Williams Grand Prix Engineering 1-2 of the season. Well, 8 laps, it is a long way, and it isn't.
Well, what is it, Alan? Is it a long way or not then? But it is 8 laps, I can assure you, can be as long as a full Grand Prix distance, and it's at this point in the race a driver can sometimes begin to hear things he hasn't heard before. Maybe, he's backed off a little bit, the momentum has gone, the car starts to slide around a little bit more. It's always difficult just to judge how quickly do you need to go at this point in the race when you've got such a commanding lead. I know when I was racing, one of the things that I didn't like was having the team put out a go slow or slow down sign, because the rhythm that I had developed in the race kept me alive, kept me awake. If you then are artificially made slow down, you lose the rhythm, you become less smooth in your driving, and that's when errors can then begin to be seen. Gerhard Berger still chipping away at this man Michael Schumacher. Berger some 8.5 seconds behind him, but again, Schumacher in the same situation Mansell is. He's got his 3rd place really where he wants it. He can control the pace he wants to run at. If Berger does pick up a couple of tenths here, then Schumacher instantly responds, and really not under any big pressure whatsoever. Great race again, a very, very mature race from Michael Schumacher, and one wonders just how much talent this guy has got left, because he's only in the 7th or 8th Grand Prix, and he's driving with tremendous maturity as well as speed.
Now, the question could be, John, Michael Schumacher not coming up the traditional route of Formula 3, Formula 3000 into Formula 1, but he's made that sidestep to Mercedes sports cars. He's raced in sports cars for 2 years as part of the Mercedes junior team, as was Carl Wendlinger, and well, you've got those long races, you've got to have the stamina to do those long races, and maybe up between his ears he thinks a little different than if he would have come through the Formula 3000 route.
Yes, one of the troubles of coming into 3000 is it's very, very competitive and very difficult to win. Michael Schumacher and Carl Wendlinger came out of sports car racing, which they dominated with Mercedes in 1990. 91 was a less successful year, but they had the momentum and they had the confidence. They got into, certainly in Schumacher's case, a very competitive car. Oh, look at this. Well, Berger finally gets past, but that's again the dangers of the back markers not really making room when they should do. But going back to Schumacher and Wendlinger, And in Schumacher's case particularly, he got into the Jordan and was just instantly fast. And of course, confidence is ultimately what any sport, and motor racing is so different, is about. And if you've got that confidence, the self-belief, and you're naturally talented and fast, well, the results are going to come.
Well, look at that, Gerhard Berger at the moment in 4th place with 5 laps to go in this, or 5.5 laps to go, I should say, in this 16th Mexican Grand Prix. And we've seen no different story than we've seen during the first Grand Prix, that the Williams are in a class of their own, and I think we all can't wait for the new McLaren to get up to speed and maybe get to Brazil.
Well, I think the intention McLaren have got for Brazil is to have 6 cars there. Now that's an almighty effort the team is going to have to make. They will take, I understand, the 3 current cars they've had in South Africa and here in Mexico, and 3 of the new MP4-7. That's the first really new car that we've seen from McLaren, in fact back from the original days of the MP4s. Completely different method of chassis manufacture. It's now got the favoured anhedral front end, semi-automatic gearbox, fly-by-wire throttle control, extremely high-tech, and whether the car ultimately was going to be quick enough, well, that's the test we'll not know until Brazil.
Nigel Mansell completing his 64th out of 69 laps, 5 to go, and well, it's always hard to say, but I can't really see anything go wrong for Nigel now, but it's still motor racing, and you haven't won a race until you've passed a man with a checkered flag, that's for sure. Nigel Mansell, it would be, or it could be his 23rd career win, and he's got 20 points compared to Ayrton Senna, who's only got 4.
Yes, but remember back to the championship in 91, we saw Ayrton Senna win the first 4 Grand Prix. It was only in Monaco where Mansell picked up his first points, which was a 2nd place. But then by mid-season, everything changed, so it's not really too clever at this point in the season to anticipate the championship being over and done with. Nigel Mansell winning in South Africa, really winning here today in Mexico, looking on paper to be favourite for Brazil. I can assure you, McLaren, Ayrton Senna, Honda, Shell, all the people involved in that team are not about to sit back and allow the situation to progress very much further. And I think we're going to have a fantastic season in prospect, because these 2 men, Nigel Mansell, Ayrton Senna, are currently the 2 top Formula 1 drivers. So this is the championship. The championship is going to be about their teams and about those 2 guys.
Well, I think a legacy of the bumpiness of the circuit, John, here is the broken wing mirror.
Yes, it is. You see Nigel getting a right wing mirror that's shattered, or partly shattered. That's probably an effect from the bumps. But he hasn't had to worry about using his mirrors very much this race, because nobody's been in a position to challenge him. So other than just keeping an eye on those that he's overtaken, no real need for wing mirrors today for Nigel.
Well, and if we have a quick look at the top 7 at the moment, there's nothing changed. Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese, Michael Schumacher in 3rd, Gerhard Berger still 9.7 seconds behind Schumacher. Then it's Andrea de Cesaris and the Lotus twins, Hakkinen and Herbert in 6th and 7th place. Out of the race, we saw Martin Brundle retire with the Benetton Ford. We saw Alesi, Morbidelli, Fittipaldi, Stefano Modena, Mauricio Gugelmin, Olivier Gruyard, Capelli and Wendlinger at the start, and then maybe the most important non-finisher of the day, Ayrton Senna, with something which looked like mechanical failure, and you look at the top 6.
Well, Ayrton Senna, we saw him just after he got out of his car way back, the first quarter of the race. He'd be a very disappointed man. He's had one of the most difficult weekends of his Grand Prix career. He had that shunt on Friday, he got a whack on his left leg. He had a lot of physiotherapy throughout the weekend. He hoped to be able to at least pick up some points, but that's not to be. And all that will do is make him even more determined to get his new car ready and competitive as quickly as possible. And I thought he might wing his way back to Brazil, but in fact I wouldn't be surprised to see Ayrton Senna testing at Silverstone sometime this week in the new McLaren with its semi-automatic gearbox, its anhedral front end, brand new method of construction, a very, very stiff chassis, and the team have really had to relearn the philosophy of their cars, because this car is quite a lot different from the current MP4 6s and its derivatives. So they made a lot of progress last week in the early part of last week before this Grand Prix with testing again at Silverstone. So let's hope for Brazil we'll see a much more competitive McLaren team. We certainly need it because right now Williams have got everything they need. They're just sitting there cruising away, taking first and seconds at their will. Look at this, Nigel Mansell just squeezing Eric Comas as he comes down to the end of the straight. And there you are, that's the indicative view of the performance of one Renault V10 car over another Renault V10 car.
Well, Ayrton Senna, he might do some of the testing, but I think the bulk of the testing comes down on test driver Mark Blundell, John.
Yes, Mark is the number one test driver for the McLaren team, but of course at the end of the day, the man, Ayrton Senna, and the other man, Gerhard Berger, the men who are going to be racing these cars, have got to be there. And the things that Mark Blundell does are extremely important for the team, and he will do a lot of the development work. Once that new car has been established and is a runner, then as they get into the active ride suspension that McLaren of course are developing to try and match that the Williams have got on their car right now, so Mark Blundell's role is a very, very important role as well.
And of course Mark having the experience of developing the Williams system when he was the test driver for the Williams team.
Yes, very important, very valuable information for McLaren. Of course Williams blessed that move by Mark Blundell. They weren't in a position to give him a drive, and Ron Dennis was looking for a young up-and-coming driver to do the bulk of their testing work, so no problems with Mark to move over to McLaren as their number one test driver.
Well, we're on our 69th and last lap of the Mexican Grand Prix. Nigel Mansell starting that lap with 11.9 seconds ahead of teammate Riccardo Patrese, and unless the car stops somewhere on this circuit, Nigel Mansell will win his 23rd Grand Prix of his Grand Prix career in 167 Grand Prix. He's won 23, and he's got 20 points in the bag towards the World Drivers' Championship. Riccardo Patrese backing him up again, very good. Second place, and Michael Schumacher, Gerhard Berger, Andrea de Cesaris and Mika Hakkinen. That's the top six. That's the people that are going to get the points here with, well, half a lap to go.
Yes, Nigel Mansell now really just going through the formality of finishing the last lap of this 16th Mexican Grand Prix, and really at this point he will now have backed off because he'd almost knocked the car out of gear and coast across the finish line and still win this race. Last time into the Peraltada, this notorious corner, the corner that has been regraded, going from 18 degrees down to 5 degrees. In effect, didn't make a great deal of difference to the exit speed, but look at Mansell, absolutely jubilant, hand out of the car, and that is a result he'll be very, very happy indeed with. Driven a superb race, never put a wheel wrong, judged it perfectly from the red light to green, taking the checkered flag, and well, we'll see Nigel when he gets out of the car, probably looking very fresh indeed. Very easy ride ultimately for him. I know that he might want you to believe that his contribution was, well, it was very significant indeed. Well, I mean, but when you're winning a Grand Prix and when you've got a car that wins like that, it's always, relatively speaking, easy. It's the poor people that are finishing behind you that have had to work so hard to get their second through sixth spots. But when you're in a winning car and you're winning the Grand Prix, well, no wonder you can get out of a car looking fresh and relaxed.
Well, a man who's worked very hard indeed, when we look at a very happy Frank Williams, is Andrea de Cesaris, who finished in 5th place today. He dropped back to 16th on that very first lap, and he's fought his way back up to 5th. He had some retirements on his way, but still he overtook a lot of people. Mansell 1, Patrese 2, and Schumacher in 3rd place. The Union Jack being waved here in Mexico City. A jubilant Nigel Mansell, and I think the confidence he's building at the moment. We spoke to him over the weekend when I said, well, there's an air of confidence that nothing can go wrong. And he said to me, well, that's your words, because I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong, but still, it's looking good, John.
Well, I think it's looking fantastic for Mansell, for Williams. And I think really the big change that I've seen in Nigel over the winter time is that in 91, he learned quite a lot about winning, not just races, but winning a championship. He moved to Florida with his family. He's very happy indeed. Look, he's just thrown his gloves off to somebody at the side of the track. But this move to Florida, He seems to be very, very happy indeed with his lifestyle out there. He's been able to do more training. He's got himself very, very fit physically, very fit mentally. He came to South Africa sharp as a pin, dominated the entire weekend, and really dominated the entire weekend here in Mexico. Only in one session have we seen Nigel Mansell in the 2 Grand Prix not top the lists, and in fact it was his teammate Ricardo Patrese that did it on Saturday afternoon. But now we're seeing really a vintage Nigel Mansell, and as long as his car remains competitive, there's nothing really I can see to stop him winning more and more races.
The big difference between last year, before we start making comparisons, I think, John, is that Ricardo Patrese is backing Mansell up perfectly. Well, last year, you did have Gerhard Berger having the odd fault, although not of all were his fault, but we've seen 2 Grand Prix now, and 2 times we had a Williams 1-2.
Well, I think we're going to see a lot more of that before the season ends, and the next race now to look forward to will be in Brazil.
Well, now we see the World Driving Standings after 2 Grand Prix. Remember, there's still 14 to go, so there's still 140 points to be won by the winner of all those. But Nigel Mansell, the 20 points he's got are in the bag. 12 points for Ricardo Patrese in second place, and now moving up to third place is Michael Schumacher, who puts 4 points by the 3 points he already had from South Africa. So he's got 7 and is third in the championship. And of course 16 points for Williams in South Africa, 16 points for Williams here, and the gap there is even bigger than in the Drivers' Championship.
Well, there we see a very happy Nigel Mansell. He's obviously quite warm, pouring water over his head, but a great race from Nigel. Michael Schumacher in third place. Look at him, fresh as a daisy, Schumacher is. Congratulating Mansell, congratulating Ricardo Patrese. Ricardo now doing the same to Nigel. Well done, my son. Well, really, I'd like to finish first, but the truth be known. But anyway, well done, Nigel. And we're now going to see the drivers come up onto the podium, receive their prizes, and get that ubiquitous bottle of champagne, which they will then spray over the press, the media, the team members below them. But really, Nigel, he didn't look at all tired or worn out when he got out of the car. He didn't sort of leap out of it either, but that's more or less his way.
Well, Michael Schumacher always looks fit, John. You said that. Look at him on the podium there. But that is probably legacy of the fact that when he was very young, when he was only 18, 19 years of age, he's been in the sort of jungle regime, and he's been a very fit man ever since. And so the basics are basically right.
He's a very young man, and that's the difference, because in Michael Schumacher, 23, Nigel, I think he's claiming 39 at the minute. So 16 years difference, and that makes an awful lot, particularly, at 23 you should be strong and fit. But Nigel has got experience and he's got stamina, and that is what wins motor races. Fitness in itself is a very important element, but it's the ability to maintain a performance throughout a Grand Prix. It's the maturity the mental maturity. That is why Nigel Mansell here is standing in front of us, the winner of the second Grand Prix of 1992, now allowing himself a moment's relaxation, and a very happy man, just catching his breath.
Well, we've been waiting for the ceremony and the national anthems to be played, and we see on the left of your screen, you can see the scrutineers already checking that car.
Well, Nigel, another day's work done, another 10 points in the bin. Back down to Florida, or up to Florida as it is from Mexico City. I imagine tomorrow morning he'll be out on the golf course. But it is a tough race, and in spite of driving the Williams, and that is the best car currently in Formula One, it's no easy ride, just easier than the opposition.
Well, there we see again the top of the table in the World Drivers' Championship. Nigel Mansell being 20 points, 8 points ahead of the man on his left side. That's teammate Ricardo Patrese.
a supremacia dos Williams e também, um tanto surpreendentemente, pela fugosidade deste jovem que está aqui do lado direito, ou que estava há instantes na imagem do lado direito, o Michael Schumacher, que é a grande revelação desta época da Fórmula 1 e que foi uma das grandes vedetas deste grande prémio do México. Uma prova realizada em 69 voltas, com 1 hora 31 minutos e 53 segundos de duração. Não foi batido o recorde em relação ao ano passado. No ano passado, o Ricardo Patrese...
Mas apenas em 67 voltas de duração e não temos exatamente ainda a média, não sei se a média foi batida ou não. O tempo tinha que ser superior, porque foram efetuadas mais 2 voltas. No entanto, considerando o tempo...
Mas em termos de volta mais rápida não foi batido o recorde.
Em termos de volta mais rápida não foi batido. No entanto, em termos de tempo de corrida... penso que a média realizada este ano foi mais rápida do que a média realizada no ano passado. Isto porque o ano passado, para 67 voltas, o Patrese fez praticamente 1 hora e 30 minutos. Este ano, Mansell, com mais 2 voltas, faz menos de 1 hora e 32 minutos. Portanto, isto dá uma média mais elevada do que na corrida do ano passado.
E não há dúvida nenhuma, o Michael Schumacher é o menino querido do público mexicano. Viu-se quando ele levantou o seu troféu, a grande agitação do público nesse momento. Patrese que atira o seu boné para o público e naturalmente aquele já tradicional banho de champanhe, que certamente dará bem bom jeito nesta altura em que os pilotos estão numa fase de descompressão e que são fortemente ovacinados por este, diga-se, simpaticíssimo público mexicano que não regateia aplausos aos pilotos e a estes brilhantes 3 primeiros classificados, Mansell, Patrese e Schumacher. Estamos quase no final desta nossa transmissão direta daqui da cidade do México, quando são 15 horas